Hello and welcome back to Art with Mr. Mariani. I'm Mr. Mariani. Today we're going to be continuing our lesson from last week. So if you did not watch last week's video, it's important that you go back and watch that video for this video to make sense. We're talking about perspective, and we know it arrives in art at a very early time. Even the philosopher Plato wrote that the art of measuring and numbering and weighing things could help us understand the magic and the deception of our own eyes. And perspective, again, is an artist trying to show you what they see. So as an artist, you are constantly using these tools of deception on a two-dimensional piece of paper, a flat piece of paper, to make people think they're looking at something that's three-dimensional. So last week we talked about the very famous artist Caillebotte and how he was making those illusions or trying to trick people to see something that looks 3D on that 2D surface. He was doing it while being an impressionist, which is very uncommon because none of the other impressionistic artists were focused on shapes, forms, or making something even look realistic. So in today's lesson, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about perspective, two-point perspective, vanishing point, scale, horizon line. And if you are not familiar with those words, please go back and watch the first video, because the more you know for this video, the easier this video is going to be for you to complete this lesson. Let's go ahead and let's get started. What you're going to be needing for our art lesson today is a pencil, a ruler, and a white sheet of paper. That's all you'll need. Okay. So last week we talked a little bit about two-point perspective, and the idea again with two-point perspective is that you have a horizon line, you have one vanishing point, and then two vanishing points. So we have two vanishing points, one on one side, one on the other side. Okay, that means I'm gonna have two areas that things disappear into. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's make a shape, just a random shape. Let's make a random building, okay? So if I have a vertical line here, and then I go from the top of my vertical line to my vanishing point. We did this last week, so if you didn't watch last week's video, please go back and do that. It will help you get caught up to where we are right now. So let's say that I have these lines just like this, okay? Then what I'm going to do is I would make the corner of my building vertical, vertical. Now, it's important that my vertical lines are parallel. Parallel means they will not run into each other. So if we look at this line and this line, we know these two lines are not parallel because if they kept going, they would crash into each other. This line and this line are parallel because they will, if they keep going, never cross. So when I'm making these vertical lines, these lines that go straight up and down, I need to remember to keep my lines parallel. So once I have these parallel lines, windows. I'm gonna make one big window on the side of this building. Obviously it's not gonna be this big, but let's just try it. So if I have a vertical line nice and big like that, what I'm gonna do is lightly go to my vanishing point and go to my vanishing point. Then I would slide over a little bit and make another vertical line. And that is the size of my window with correct perspective. So if I was going to trace it, I could trace it like this, and voila. That window is the correct perspective for this building. Correct scale, correct size, everything on this is correct, okay? So we're gonna get back to where we were last week. Okay, so let's go ahead and start adding on these windows. So the first thing I'm gonna do is, if you have a ruler, this is a great time to use a ruler. If you don't have a ruler, find a straight edge or something that you can kind of measure out these windows. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mark my windows at every inch. How about that? So let's start from the top. I have 1 inch, I'm gonna put a mark, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, and I'm left with a little extra at the bottom, which is fine. Now I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. Measure it out, 1 inch, oops, already made one. 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and make my line across, just so I can see, these are guidelines. These should be nice and light. You don't need to make these very dark. But I'm making these just so I can see where my windows would go. Now in the center of the building, you're looking at it straight on, it's gonna mirror that rectangle. So if I go ahead and I say I want my windows, since I have 1 inch space, I'm gonna say I want my windows to be a 1/2 inch. That way I can have a little space for a ledge. So what I'm gonna do is make a 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. And then these would be the same, and I can go ahead and I can make like a little window ledge if I want. Same thing, use your ruler for these. I'm gonna speed up a little bit with just doing it freehand so you don't have to watch me do the full thing. But the idea is if you use your ruler and you stay with the 1/2 inch and you stay with the 1/2 inch, your windows will be all the same size. You can see the one window that I did freehand isn't quite 1/2 inch. So it's better to use the ruler. And what you can do is you can work your way down the building. Let's put some window ledges on here. Okay, so I have my center windows right there. I'm not gonna go ahead and trace those with my final pencil or a darker pencil until the very end. Now what I wanna do is I wanna implement these guidelines that are in the center of my building to my vanishing point by using those diagonal lines. Again, stay on the corner of the vanishing point, and vanishing point. Slide it over, other side. Now the other side, it's gonna be a little steeper because my perspective is showing less of this side of the building. So utilizing both vanishing points. All right, so now I have 2 vanishing points. I have the windows kind of set. Now I'm gonna go ahead and add in those windows on the side. One thing that's important to remember, and that a lot of artists make mistakes, is that the windows that are towards the center are gonna be larger than the windows that are at the back of the building. As things go to the vanishing points, the principle is they get smaller, smaller, and smaller until they disappear. To vanish means to disappear. So it's important to remember vanishing meaning disappearing, because when we're drawing, that's gonna be a big part of how we keep the right size. So let's start off by using that 1/2 inch. We talked about that 1/2 inch vertical line in each one of these. Okay, so I have my 1/2 inch vertical line in each one. Now, there's a couple different ways of doing this. I'm gonna show you my favorite way of doing this, because I think it's less work. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the top of that 1/2 inch and I'm gonna make another guideline. The bottom of that 1/2 inch, make sure you're on the vanishing point, look at the back of that ruler. I'm gonna keep doing it. And the reason why is when I go to put in my vertical lines, I think it goes a little bit faster. There's a couple different ways. So now I have these guidelines inside of here. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go vertical, 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 vertical. Then I'm gonna slide over. I'm gonna make my windows over here. Vertical, 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 vertical. I'm staying between those guidelines I just made. Now this time I'm gonna make my ruler a little bit closer. And these windows are going to start getting smaller. And how I do that is just by putting them closer to get each other and decreasing the amount of space in between them. And that's one thing that Caillebotte understood, is he understood that space on a paper, if manipulated, could show visual depth, could create the illusion of something being three-dimensional, even though it is on a two-dimensional surface. And he did this at the age of 29, which at the time in that group of artists was very young. He was also very wealthy, so that might have played a role into why he was able to do it when he was able to do it. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trace my lines to show you the lines that I would keep. The pink lines are lines that I would erase. But these lines are the lines that I'm going to keep. So you can see very clearly how I'm starting to build in my building. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward here so you don't have to watch me do the rest of the building, and then I'm gonna get onto the roof. Okay, so now fast forward a little bit, put both sides going to both two vanishing points, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in these top pieces that were on Kalibot's roof. I ran out of a little bit of space, so I'm going to make them a little bit shorter than what they appear to be. So Kalibot has these rectangular shapes at the top, and he has a triangle in the middle, and then he has these kind of chimneys. During this time period, there would have been, and there it was, a lot of fireplaces, and that contributed to the heavy pollution that was in Paris at the time. Again, another reason why this painting is so different is it's portraying a beautiful Paris, where Paris, again, would have been very dirty at this moment. So what I'm going to do is I have my first part set up. So I have this shape, this shape. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the top corner, and I'm going to my vanishing point again. And I'm going to go to the top corner, and I'm going to go to my vanishing point again. And the reason why is now I know if I go vertical and then just horizontal, then move over, go vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal. I know exactly where these little ledges are going to be. Now, one thing I want to point out to you is, remember we talked about those windows getting smaller and closer together as they go back? It's the same principle for these chimneys. These chimneys that Kalibot's making, when they go towards the back, they are going to get smaller and closer to each other. So you can see that, again, they're getting smaller, closer to each other, smaller, closer to each other, smaller, closer to each other. The last thing I wanted to do for today's lesson is talk about the doors, the bottom of this. Now, Kalibot's painting doesn't have a door right there. It's a central window. And I don't know exactly if we can see. So there's some French written above the window, and I'm not exactly sure what it says. That's something to probably look up for next lesson. But we're going to go ahead and put a door at the bottom. And how we do that is just make a vertical line, the width of your door, and then make a horizontal at the top. And now I have a door right in the center here. And maybe I'll make it a two-door where you can go in. Now, if I want to make exits on the sides of the buildings, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my guideline, put it on my vanishing point, put it at the top of my door so I know the heights of all the other doors, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure it touches the vanishing point. And the reason why is, again, these doors are going to follow that line, and as those doors get closer together, they get closer together as they go further away and smaller. And now I have a bunch of exits to the street. This is where I want you guys to end today. Try to complete it all. If you want to erase out your vanishing points, you can. And your guidelines, I'm using a white because I'm using colored pencils. I'm using a white one. I can go ahead and color out all those extra areas that I no longer need. I can pretend there's clouds, I guess, behind it. But if you're using a pencil, this is a great time to erase out whatever you used. And this is going to carry us into our next assignment on Thursday. Our next assignment is going to be a 2-point perspective assignment, but it's going to be a little more creative. We're not going to actually recreate something from art history. We're going to create something that we've envisioned, and I look forward to seeing you guys then.